I will go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen with you so you can all see my slideshow. And our topic today is starting or purchasing a business. And there's a little bit different things you need to think about, whether you're going to start your own business from scratch or you're going to actually purchase someone else's business. So we kind of want to go over that today and look at it. So we will get started with that. The first thing is a little bit about me. I'm a graduate of the University of South Carolina. I graduated from the University of South Carolina School of Law in 2013. My practice areas include estate planning, Medicaid planning, and business planning. So the first topic we're going to talk about today is when you're considering starting a business. Do you want to start as an LLC or a corporation? And the documents you need to think about having in place when you start a business are things like leases, contracts, and proper invoicing. So we've had a few more people join, so I'm kind of going to go back over this slide to start with. Okay, so since we've had a few more people join, we're going to start a little bit over. So this presentation is going to be about starting a business or purchasing a business. So the first topic we're going to go over is considerations for starting a business. The biggest consideration is usually, do I want to incorporate in general, and should I be an LLC or a corporation? And then we need to think about the documents we all need to have in place, such as leases, contracts, and the proper way to do invoices for your clients. First big question is, why should I even incorporate? Well, reasons you want to incorporate are for the protection of personal assets. You want to make sure that your personal assets are protected and this business is a separate entity from you. If you want to sell your business, if you've incorporated, you can sell the business. If you haven't incorporated, you're not going to have a little bit more trouble selling a business because it's going to be a sole proprietor and you're more just selling the assets, not the business. It's also important when you go into business with other people that it prevents misunderstandings among the members or the shareholders, because with this, you'll have an operating agreement or bylaws that go through what your rules are for the business. So there's no confusion as, oh, well, we thought we agreed on this, or we said this and I thought it meant this. You have everything in place. And it also can help you to get funding. If you need investors, they're going to want to see that you're an incorporated entity. There's possible tax benefits such as employment taxes being paid and you're getting a tax break. I always say resort to your accountant to help you with those, because starting a business is more than just the legal side. We want to work with our accountants as well to make sure we're doing things properly. It also adds a layer of privacy for you. This business is what's out to the public, not you individually. So I always think it's good when you're starting a business, you want to incorporate, whether you're an LLC or a corporation. Both are better than being the sole proprietor in most situations. So everybody thinks they want to be a limited liability company. I think people think those are easier and corporations are more complicated, when in all reality, it's kind of the reverse. So with a limited liability company, those can be used as very sophisticated tools. So one way we like to think of these as a limited liability is your Lexus, where the corporation sometimes is your Camry. They both get you where you need to go, but you can put more bells and whistles on the higher end car, but that doesn't mean you need it. We like to use liability companies for appreciating assets. So these are things like real estate. So if you own property that you're renting, that might be a better asset to go in an LLC for tax purposes. With an LLC, there's two types. There's member managed and manager managed. So member managed means every person that is a member of the LLC gets to make decisions, where manager managed means that You appoint a manager or managers, you can have multiples, to do the day-to-day operations of the business. A limited liability company, ownership is not the same as profit and loss allocation. So if you're 50-50, that doesn't mean you have to allocate profit and loss 50-50 with an LLC. With an LLC, you need an operating agreement. If you don't have one, there is one that's been created for you through the statute. But I recommend having one that you've created so that way you know what's in it and you understand it. With a limited liability company, this is where we would want to work with your accountant to figure out the best way for you to be taxed. You can be taxed as a partnership, a sole proprietor, an S Corp, or a C Corp. So there's multiple ways to be taxed with an LLC. So that's just your LLC in a nutshell. The next thing we're going to talk about is the corporation. So a corporation we use more for service businesses with depreciating assets, and they're very simple. So there's two types of corporations we can use here in South Carolina. You have your statutory corporation, which a lot of states do not have this, so it's an advantage of starting your business in South Carolina. And you have your regular corporation, which everybody thinks about. So statutory is one of the simplest entities you can find. You have 2 pages of bylaws, and the bylaws tell you how you operate your business. You eliminate your board of directors. So in a regular corporation, you have a board of directors, but with this statutory corporation, you do not have to have a board of directors. When you're setting up the corporation, you waive having this. You will have shareholders and officers. Shareholders are who own the corporation. Your officers you have to have are a president and a secretary, and one person can serve as both officers. You don't have to have 2 people. And you can be taxed as an S Corp or a C Corp. And then a regular corporation is your bylaws are a little bit longer. Once again, you can be taxed as an S Corp or a C Corp. And you have shareholders, that's who own the business. You have to have that board of directors, and you have officers. And you usually are going to have your president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. With the regular corporation, it's a little bit more formal and structured because of that board of directors. Whether you're looking to go for an LLC or a corporation, both will give you that protection you need as an incorporated entity to keep your assets separate from the assets of the business. That's kind of the biggest thing when you're thinking of starting this is I want to incorporate to protect myself and to have this corporate formality. Then it's let me decide, do I want to be an LLC or a corporation? And I think that's a conversation we can definitely have if you're thinking of starting a business and go a little bit more in detail. But now you know the basics of the LLC, the corporation, and then we have 2 corporations here in South Carolina. So when you're starting a business, there's other things you want to consider after you've decided if I'm going to be an LLC or a corporation. Where's your business going to take place? Are you leasing a space? Are you buying real estate, which will operate your business? If you're leasing, you want to have a lease agreement in place that you've had an attorney review and make sure that it is to your advantage and you understand what you're getting into. You want to know if I have to pull out early from this lease, what's going to happen to me? Am I going to have to pay fees? What's going on? So you want to know that. You also want to know who's responsible for taxes or who's responsible for the utilities. Is that part of your lease payment or are you responsible? So those are all things that should be incorporated in your lease. You also want to go over common areas. If you're in a big building, who is responsible? The landlord should be responsible for those common areas, but you want to make sure that's in your agreement. You also, if you're thinking of buying real estate that will operate your business, you may want to think about setting up a separate entity such as an LLC to hold the real estate and your business be operated from a separate company. And when you're doing that, you have to think about your real estate purchase agreements and working with realtors and banks for financing of this business. Other things also are you going to have employees for your business? Are you going to categorize them as employees or independent contractors? And this makes a big difference on how they're taxed and what your liability is as far as with even workers' comp. We'll have a separate seminar at some point about the differences with employees and independent contractors, because this is a big topic that's kind of hard to squeeze into this, but it is something you want to consider. If you're doing business with other businesses, what are your vendor contracts? What is in there? Have you looked at it? Do you understand it? You may want an attorney to review those for you as well. And how are you doing billing and invoices? You want to think about, do I need to set up QuickBooks for invoices? What software am I using? Do I want an accountant if I'm having these employees? Do I need an accountant to help me with payroll? So these are all things you want to consider. So when you're starting a business, we want to think about incorporating so we can get that protection that an incorporated entity gives us for our business. So we're going to think, do we want to be an LLC or do we want to be a corporation? Then we're going to look at these other things like, where's my business going to be? Am I buying? Am I leasing? Do I need another LLC for my real estate? What contracts do I have with other people? Am I having employees? Am I having independent contractors? And what are the benefits to each? And how am I going to do my billing and invoices? And who else do I need to get involved to help me with this business, such as having an attorney or an accountant or a financial advisor to help you with making these decisions and starting your business? So that's kind of our first part of this presentation is, are you starting a business? The next part is, are you purchasing a business? So we're going to talk about, are you purchasing the business or the assets? Will you be applying for financing? And what else do you need? So many times when you're purchasing a business, you're going to go ahead and want to form your own LLC or corporation, and that will be the entity that purchases this business. So that's thing number one is, I'm going to go ahead and set up my LLC or corporation and kind of think about the things from starting a business to move forward with purchasing a business. So when you're purchasing a business, you have two ways you can purchase it. You're going to purchase the assets or you're going to purchase the business itself. So when you're purchasing the whole business, you're going to be buying the business plus its debts, all its assets, everything incorporated with it. So if you're buying this business, you want to make sure what debts they have, what are you taking on, do searches. If it's got real estate involved, look to see if there's mortgages, look to see if there's promissory notes, look to see if any of the assets are secured through UCC type loans where you can look up online. So you want to know the debts of the business if you're purchasing it, and you want to have that person sign stating these are all the debts. If anything else comes up, I will be responsible. Some people want to just purchase the assets of the business. So you're only purchasing the assets and no debt. This is a good option to do a lot of times if you're a purchaser. And those assets don't just mean the tangible assets like the equipment or anything like that. It can include the goodwill of the business, a client list, the website domain, phone numbers, intellectual property, anything that business owns. So a lot of times we want to think about doing an asset purchase if we're starting a business and we're buying another business. Or if we're selling a business, we may want to think more about selling it as a whole business so we get rid of those debts. Another thing to consider when you're looking at buying a business is, are you going to need financing for this business? If so, you want to talk with your lender early. You want to make sure you understand what is needed for financing and what type loan you're going to get. You may want to look into some SBA loans, small business loans. You may even think of, I'm going to finance a seller finance, which means that the person selling you the business is going to be holding the loan for you, and you're going to make payments to them, and they'll have the business as collateral. You may, if you're having a loan with a business, like a bank, they may want you to have life insurance. So that way, if something happens to you, that life insurance can cover the terms of your loan. That's one thing you need to consider when you're starting a business. You want to make sure when you're buying this business, you have a purchase agreement in place to protect you from the start, whether you're financing or not. We want to make sure we have proper terms in this business, how the assets are being distributed over to the new owner, what the key financing terms are, what all the warranties that the seller is having, what their obligations are, so you understand what you're actually purchasing. And if something goes wrong, that you have this agreement that you can enforce. So whether you're having a lender or not, you need this, but especially if you're having a lender, they're going to require you to have this purchase agreement. And that's something you may want an attorney to help you start and finish, so that way you know you're being protected and your interest is being protected. Once you do decide your financing, you're going to want to make sure you understand the terms of your loan and note. So you're going to want to make sure if you're purchasing real estate as part of this business, you understand you have a mortgage and a note. The note is what obligates you to pay. The mortgage is what attaches to the real property. If you're not having that, you're going to have a note that could be secured by the assets of the business. So it's important for you to know what all you're signing when you are getting a loan. So overall, when you're thinking of starting this purchase, you want to have a purchase agreement. You want to talk to a lender early if you need to go down that path. Need to see what requirements that lender has. It could include things like life insurance, regular insurance, umbrella policies, all those things you want to know. You want to understand what type of loan you're getting and how it's backed, and you want to understand the terms of your loan and note before you sign anything. So that's kind of important anytime you're dealing with a business, but especially if you're purchasing with the finance, you want to deal with all these things early on. Also, when you're thinking of purchasing a business, you want to think about having a non-compete and non-solicitation. This means that the business you're buying can't go next door and start the same business. You've paid to purchase this business asset. So you want to make sure it's successful and you can run properly. So you're buying these client lists, you're buying all the goodwill, you're buying the website, and say you started Joe's Tire Store. Well, the original owner, Joe, goes next door and starts Joseph's Tire Sales, competing with you as Joe's Tire Sales. Well, all those prior clients may want to keep going to Joseph and not Joe. So you put this non-compete in place, which means that the prior business owner cannot do this. The non-compete's got to be limited in time. So there's a certain time frame you can put on it for it to be enforceable. And it also has to be limited in geographic region. So you want to make sure you've done that in a proper way. So if you have to go to court over this, they will enforce it. So we have to be limited in time and we have to be limited in geographic region. But this will help you from not having them come and compete with you. You also want to have a non-solicitation in there. You don't want them to be able to solicit your customers or your employees. So that way you have this business and you're set up for success where the prior owner cannot do harm to your business. In any type of employment situation as well, you may want to have a non-compete and non-solicitation with your employees. This means that if you have an employee come to work with you, say that it's a very complicated area and you have some really cool trade secret, you don't want them to take it to the next employer. So you have a non-compete that they can't do that same line of work, which is again limited in geography and limited in time. You also want that non-solicitation. So if somebody leaves your place and starts their own business, they can't come and take your employees and clients. So this is important to have when purchasing a business and also with your employees. And with your employees, you also want to have in your employment agreement that you can't divulge trade secrets or secrets and intellectual property from your business. We'll go further into that on a webinar in the future where we talk employee versus independent contractor and employment agreement. One thing I always like to do with any of my business owners, whether you are purchasing a business, starting a business, is go over some basic tips with everybody. So that's kind of how we're going to end our presentation today, to have a little bit of time for questions too, is to go over some tips. So when you're invoicing your client, you want to have the due date that the bill is due. So say you invoice on the end of the month. So you send out your invoices the last day of the month. You want to have that they're due in the time frame you expect to get payment, whether that's a week from when you send it out or by the end of the next month. If you don't, the courts will interpret this, and what they think is reasonable may not be what you think is reasonable. So you want to have the due date on there. You also want to have on there, if you're collecting, that if you don't get paid on this, interest is going to accrue on late payments. If you don't have that on there, you will not be allowed to get interest through the courts. And you also want to have that if I have to go to an attorney to handle collection fees, or if I have to go to court to deal with collection fees, that those fees will be paid. If they're not on there, that doesn't guarantee you getting them in court. So you want to make sure on your invoice we always have the due date, the interest on late payments, and we want to have a clause in there for collection and attorney's fees if we have to go that route. I always tell my business clients, if they're signing loan documents, to be cautious of personal guarantees. So this means that you individually would be liable for the debt, not just your business, which in theory, that's like, well, why incorporate if I'm not thought of as a separate entity and not getting this protection? Well, sometimes there's no way around a personal guarantee. If you're new to starting a business, a bank, and you don't have years of statements to show you have the capacity to pay this loan, this business probably is going to need you to sign a personal guarantee. The bank is not going to want to give you a loan without it. But you do want to be cautious of them and make sure they are limited in the amount and they are limited in the duration. When you pay off this loan, this personal guarantee needs to go away. So you just want to review those carefully. We don't recommend our clients signing them most of the time, but there are times you're going to have to, just because if you want to get that loan, the bank is going to require it. It's also important you always sign your documents to reflect your position in your corporation or in your LLC. If you're an LLC, you would always need to sign it, for example, Lauren Ward, member of a business law firm LLC. I don't just sign Lauren Ward. I want to always put that member so people know that I'm signing on behalf of the business, not as me individually. If you are a corporation, you'll sign as your officer position. So Lauren Ward, president of a business law firm incorporated. That way I'm putting everyone on notice that I'm signing for my business. On that same note, when you're putting your business out there, you always want to have your LLC or Inc. at the end of the business. By doing this, you're showing that you are an incorporated entity. You're not doing it on yourself, so you're giving notice to the public. By putting that LLC or that Inc., you're saying, this isn't me individually, this is my business. So that's a good way to give notice. Anytime you're signing a contract, you want to review that carefully before you sign. You want to make sure the terms that you talked about with this other person are in the contract. You don't want to say, oh, we verbally agreed to this, but I don't see it in there, I'll sign anyways. No, because if it's not in the terms of the contract, then it is not part of the contract. You want to have everything in writing that you agreed upon. And the biggest thing for corporations and LLCs is to make sure you follow those corporate formalities to protect you. This means making sure you don't commingle your personal assets and your business assets. So for example, have a bank account for your business and don't pay your personal mortgage out of that account. Only use that business account to pay your business obligations. You want to make sure you always treat this LLC or corporation as a third person. You don't want to treat them as yourself, because then you pierce the corporate veil, and if you were to get sued, they could go after your personal assets. And we will go more into that at a later time too, as that's kind of a big topic to discuss. But it always is important to follow those corporate formalities to protect you. This purpose of starting a business is protect you from the debts of the business, to protect your personal assets. So if you don't follow those corporate formalities, you've lost the reason for incorporating your business. Those are our biggest tips to business owners that we always like to go over. And do I need to consult an attorney? You know, some things you may be fine with not consulting an attorney. I think it's always best your interest to make sure you have the proper documentation in place to protect your personal assets and your business. So I think you get a peace of mind knowing you're protected. While you don't have to have an attorney to do stuff, one interesting thing is if you are a business and get sued, if you're not an attorney, you can't represent that business, because technically you're giving legal advice to a third party. So that's kind of interesting to know. But overall, I think it's good to have somebody look over your documentations, make sure you're doing everything properly, because you've set up this business. This is your livelihood. This is what you're putting all your effort into, and we want to make sure you are protected if something happens to you. Since we were trying to do this in a 30-minute time frame, I wanted to go ahead and wrap up and see if anybody has any questions. If you do, feel free to unmute yourself and ask them now. Or feel free, here's my contact information. There's our office firm number on there, as well as my email address. And you are free to give me a call, send me an email, or you're welcome to chat me in here and ask a question real quick, and I'll ask it and I can share it with the group. Or feel free to unmute and ask a question. I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen. But if anybody has any, I wanted to keep you in within 30 minutes, so it's 11:26. So feel free to send me an email in the future, give me a call, or if you have questions for you personally, or you have clients that need to know any of this information, feel free to share with them and have them give me a call. We just want to make sure our business owners are protected. And we'll be doing some more of these webinars in the future to give some more information on piercing the corporate veil, making sure you're always following corporate formalities, employees and independent contractors. And we're trying to keep them short, just 30 minutes, so that way you can learn some information and go on with your day and make sure you've been educated. So feel free to give me a call or email me, but otherwise,